Hello and welcome to another one of your interviews on the Hormone Balance After 40 Summit. I am your host, Bridget Danner. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our summit sponsors and our daily sponsors. And a reminder to you that you can own this summit, all the recordings and notes and a pile of bonuses. So check that out on this page. Check out that link and enjoy this interview. Ann Louise Gittleman, welcome to the summit.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I'm so excited to speak with you. I've been kind of studying up on your body of work and am very impressed to find that I feel like you were doing like a functional medicine approach to nutrition a long time ago, like before probably the phrase was coined, so to speak.
Yes, ancient history. Well, to be honest, I've always thought outside the box, quite frankly. And so I've really focused on looking at root causes of conditions, not just symptoms, but what is the underlying cause. And when I looked at the whole topic of perimenopause, I thought to myself, so what is the underlying cause? And I really believe, Bridget, that it's a toxic experience for most women. Years ago, menopause was a breeze, but not for our generation. And that, I think, is truly the focus of my updated Before the Change.
Yeah, I've been reading an older version of it, and you're coming out with a new one a few months after the summit, so perfect timing. People, honestly, it's the best book I found on perimenopause, so thank you for writing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I wanted to actually ask you, because this might be a good segue for what you just said, that we're living in this toxic age and menopause is different. So wondered your current thoughts on this, because I feel like this conversation has come up on this summit, like, are we supposed to experience symptoms? Are we not? So one thing you said in this edition of the book is individual perimenopause differences among women do not reflect their comparative states of health. You can be extremely healthy and genetically or otherwise predisposed to perimenopausal symptoms. So is this a little bit of what you're talking about, our ability to clear toxins and that kind of a thing?
It is. It's the inability of so many women to detoxify in this day and age. And we're living in a toxic soup, and that's just the reality of living in 2017. So the ability to detoxify is first and foremost why so many women do or do not experience a really smooth sailing menopausal experience. And so it means that you really have to look at your liver. When you're talking about perimenopause, forget about hormones, look at your liver, because that is the place in which all the hormones are conjugated and metabolized. So a healthy liver equals a healthy perimenopause.
Well, let's talk more about that, because I don't think we have talked much about that on this summit. Like, what you talked about where hormones are conjugated and metabolized. Like, what does that mean? How do we support it?
Well, it means if you're getting a lot of xenoestrogens or environmental hormones, environmental estrogens from plastics, from parabens, from pesticides, from taking hormone replacement, whether it's natural, bioidentical, or not natural, synthetic, it means it all has to be funneled through the liver. So if your liver's pathways, two detox pathways, are not functioning properly with the right nutrients, you're not breaking these down so your body can eliminate those toxic estrogen metabolites. That's number one. If you don't have enough bile, which is the vehicle that the liver uses to remove all of these toxins from the system, you're not having a healthy or menopausal experience. And then if you're not taking enough fiber in your diet, you're not chelating, you're not grabbing onto these toxins that the bile is bringing out of your system and eliminating them. So it's really an inside job. It's all about nutrition and the B vitamins, which the liver so desperately needs to break down all of these toxic metabolites, and the right bile thinning liquids like lecithin to make sure that your bile is functioning properly. So as far as I'm concerned, it's all about the liver. You have to learn to love your liver on a daily basis.
I love it. I love it. So we have one talk about toxins, more or less, with Dr. Tom O'Brien. Well, I'll also be giving away a lot of detox tips, like what to avoid. So we talked about with Dr. Tom, first step is avoiding toxins. That's one step. And we'll give a lot of information about that. So maybe you and I here can concentrate on this process of supporting the liver, supporting the bile.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it. Tell us more about this nutrition that the liver needs.
Well, the reality is you don't just support the liver on a seasonal basis, which is usually this time of the year. We're talking about spring, probably March 21st to June 21st. And I know we're airing now in June. What you want to do on a daily basis is do something liver loving. So you say to yourself, what are your liver loving foods? Well, number one, it's taking some lemon and water first thing in the morning. Lemon has the ability to really thin the bile and tonify both the liver and the kidneys. So the juice of half a lemon in maybe 8 ounces of water first thing in the morning, wait 20 minutes and do whatever else you need to do in your life. It would be very important. Secondly, for the liver, and this to me is really critical, is that you use some sunflower lecithin, 2 tablespoons of sunflower lecithin, which is really important because it's a thinning liquid as well, or a thinning substance, I should say, which is very deficient in the diet. I would pop 2 tablespoons of the oily sunflower lecithin into a smoothie on a daily basis. That not only is good to smooth out and thin out the bile, which is that detoxifying fluid, the method that the body uses to get rid of your hormones, and it's good for your neurotransmitters because the cellular membrane is made from a lecithin type ingredient.
Well, I did my lemon and water today, but I've never taken lecithin, so I'm going to have to check that out.
You're in for a surprise. I mean, it's really important. It's really, and it's a weight loss. It's a weight loss secret and an anti-cellulite secret. Yeah, it's got a lot of bennies.
Oh, awesome! Awesome.
Yes, make lecithin your best friend when it comes to perimenopause.
Any other things you want to mention that support the bile? This might be a new topic for women to talk about supporting this bile.
It's a topic that we discuss in the new Before Your Change, the change before the change. Before the Change is the name of the new book, and it's also something that I cover very much in my Fat Flush series, the new Fat Flush plan, which just came out at the beginning of the year. So I would say that when it comes to bile, what you really need to do on a daily basis is the lecithin that I spoke about, is the lemon and water, and make sure that you use a little bit of beets in your diet because beets also are very important for the bile. And that would either be juicing beets, maybe 2 ounces of beets with some celery, maybe some cucumber and carrot, or you simply grate a little bit of beet or take some beetroot powder and pop that into a power drink first thing in the morning with that lecithin. So you can't beat beets when it comes to bile thinning foods. Number one, it's a superfood. And then number two, some sort of herbal bitter on a daily basis, whether that is some sort of lettuce that you're taking, maybe some arugula or endive or radicchio. You want bitter because bitter actually helps your gallbladder secrete bile, and it also acts as a bile thinner. Last but not least, if you're looking for a beverage, get rid of the coffee and get some dandelion root tea.
Okay. Supports the liver. Does it support bile too?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So we're into the bile because bile is so important. You can't live without it. Number one, nobody's talking about it. They're talking about probiotics. They're talking about leaky gut. Nobody's talking about bile, but it's dramatically connected with the ability to get rid of all of your toxins, including metabolites of estrogen, which we need to do when we're in the perimenopausal phase of life. Because as far as I'm concerned, and this just goes back to my premise, we're living in the day of toxic perimenopause. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't have these symptoms, but we're toxic because we can't detoxify. So look to the liver, number one.
Ann Louise, what about water and fats in the diet? I feel like I've kind of heard those as being important for bile. Bile production, do you agree?
Very much so.
Okay.
So the water will take maybe half of our body weight in ounces per day. So if you weigh 120, half of that is 60. So 60 ounces staggered through the day. Love the water. And in terms of the oils, you actually need a balance of oils. This is a time of life where flaxseed oil is good because flax seeds act as an estrogen modulator. So some flaxseed oil, or some coconut oil, which acts as a trigger for thyroid metabolism. So you've got your coconut oil, you've got your flaxseed oil, and I think it's important that we have some good omega-6s back in the diet, and that's where hemp seed oil comes in handy. It's got a perfect relationship of about 4-to-1 omega-6s to omega-3s.
Yeah, I've been hearing really good thing about hemp oil. And if you're a vegan, it's a good option too, right? If you're not.
The very best, 4-1 in favor of omega-6s, because believe it or not, we're omega-6 deficient. The right omega-6s. We've got a lot
Right.
of the industrialized hexane hexanized regular omega-6s, but not the good pure omega-6s that you need for the cellular membrane and for the liver to function properly. So omega-6s are your next best friend.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about healthy omega-6s. I know in your book you've got borage oil, but there's some other ones in that category. Can you talk about those?
Well, the good thing about the omega-6s, Bridget, is that they transfer into tissue-like hormones that are known as prostaglandins that really control your system on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis. So some people can't make that transformation. Therefore, we get a pre-made GLA, which is in the form of borage or evening primrose or black currant seed oil. And I like people to take at least 1 gram of that daily. So make sure you check your borage or your evening primrose oil or your black currant seed oil. You want at least 1,000 milligrams of GLA throughout the day. Now, when you look at the problems that women suffer from or experience during perimenopause, everybody talks about skin. Skin seems to be a real issue during that time of life. When you think about skin, think of omega-6 because its biggest claim to fame is skin.
Okay, great. So
beautiful, beautiful skin, clear skin,
everyone
luminous skin. We all want glowing skin. We love to love the skin we're in, but this is so important. Everybody talks about omega-3s. We've forgotten about the good omega-6s, but not me. I write about it in Before the Change.
So would you say, as far as like the skin of our youth, I mean, some people still have troubled skin in youth, but we usually have that like plump, full skin, but we're also making a lot of hormones. Is this kind of a way for us to make hormones as our hormone production is declining with age, would you say?
The omegas do have something to do with hormonal balance, but even aside from that, they plump the cell membrane, and
Just
that's
go
what's
right
so
to the
important
skin.
it goes right to the skin.
Okay.
And that's why the sunflower seed lecithin is so important because it's an omega-6, a good omega-6 that's not purified, it's not refined, it's not processed. And now we have the GLA component and the hemp seed oil, 2 tablespoons a day. And it's a great tasting oil if you've ever tasted it.
Okay.
I love it on my bitter greens.
Yeah, I think I use a little bit more like flax oil, but just so people know if they're just thinking of trying this out, you want to use it cold and just as a dressing, but you can put it on hot food, right? On top of it.
Drizzle it on hot food. You just drizzle, take the hot food out, put it on the plate. But I'd like people using much more hemp seed oil these days because I think we're overdoing omega-3s to the extent that the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, which I believe is either 4-1 in favor of omega-6 or 1-1, which is equal, is very deficient in this day and time. We need good omega-6s. So that's why this is so important for all of your listeners and viewers.
No, that's a great tip. That's a great tip. So you do mention the omega-3 is part of one pathway for hormone production. So can we talk about quality sources of omega-3 oils?
Quality sources. Well, we've got there are certain brands that I truly love, and I'm going to talk about a brand if I can.
Sure.
My favorite brand is Omega, which is not as well known. It's kind of the mother brand that taught a lot of these other companies everything they know. The Omega brand of flaxseed oil is the best tasting in my humble estimation, number one. And number two, I love their chia seeds, I love their flax seeds, and I love their high lignin flaxseed oil. So in terms of brands, there are a lot of them on the market. The Omega is one of them. Barlean's is certainly another. Just make sure that there's no bitter taste to your omega-3s, which usually suggests rancidity. They should be refrigerated, and you need to use up a bottle, a small 8-ounce bottle in about 3 weeks.
Oh, interesting. That's a good tip. Okay, let's talk about fish. Some women feel like it's, is it too dangerous to eat? Should they, do the oil instead? Give us your opinion on all that.
Well, if you're going to buy fish, look to Vital Choice because I think they have some of the healthiest fish on the planet, and they certainly test for mercury. That's important. I like Vital Choice. I like Safe Catch in terms of tuna because they test their tuna for the lowest mercury tuna. I'm not a big believer in taking a lot of fish unless it's the small fish, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, and I would take about 2 3-ounce servings twice a week. I see a lot of mercury coming from fish, and I like the fish oil for that reason because it's usually a very low mercury oil, number one. All of the other toxins are excreted out, and I think that if you've got a molecularly distilled pharmaceutical grade fish oil or krill oil for the omega-3s, you're in business.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for that. So another area we can maybe clear up is the topic of soy. So when you wrote the first edition of this book, I think people were even more soy crazy, but there's still a lot of soy confusion. And some women come to me and say, soy really makes me feel better. I don't want to give it up. But tell us what you think.
I think everything in moderation. If the soy is fermented, I'm a believer at least twice a week. I think twice a week with maybe 3 to 4 days between servings is a really good tip. That's number one. I like tempeh. I like a non-GMO tempeh and tofu. Both of those I think could be interchanged. And I like miso. I think it's a very important probiotic. So a little goes a long way. I think more than that can be toxic to certain people. And as a phytoestrogen, it makes women definitely feel better. So I think a little bit, almost as a seasoning, is what we should use. And I like that, and I like the fermented soy sauces, especially tamari, which is wheat-free.
Tamari, okay. So you're okay with a little tofu as non-GMO if it's tolerated by the person?
Oh, absolutely. As long as it's not as long as it's not an everyday process. Because the other thing about soy, which is part of the unjoy of soy, as you will, is that it's a high source of copper, and copper is usually associated with high estrogen. So we want to reduce that amount for people. So twice a week. 2 is the magic number.
Okay.
Yeah, I write a lot about that in Before the Change. Copper goes with estrogen the way zinc goes with progesterone. So if you need more progesterone, look to zinc in your diet, which is highly deficient. Most of the time, women stockpile copper. It's a feminine mineral because of the copper IUD, copper fillings, copper foods, copper water pipes, a lot of environmental sources. So make sure you level off the copper, curb your copper, look at your cooking utensils, make sure they're not copper lined or they're copper clad, so to speak, and make sure that you have enough zinc. Always think zinc, which is one of my peri-zappers in Before the Change.
Yeah, I've kind of heard that when we're going to use sort of more paleo foods, we're getting a lot of copper potentially. I think like chocolate and maybe avocado is avocado high in copper.
It is.
Yeah, some of these foods that we go to when we're trying to reduce the processed foods we can unwittingly be getting a lot of copper.
Unwittingly be getting too much copper. There are some interesting articles written about that. I've written about it for about 20 years because I was a copperhead once upon a time. Chocolate is not a superfood in my regimen, by the way. If you're going to do chocolate, you just do it twice a week. That's the magic number. And a small little piece of bitter chocolate.
Yeah, I'm actually chocolate sensitive as much as I hate to admit it, but it's kind of cross-reactive. It can be a little too stimulating for the gut is what I found out for myself,
It most definitely is. And because I got into this due to skin conditions, my body would look at, at chocolate, it would break out. So regardless of what they say, it ain't the case if you've got a copper sensitivity. Very high in copper, as is tea, by the way. Most teas are very high in copper, as are nuts and seeds and avocados. So balance is the key. Balance in all things.
It's you just taught me something about this tea. So I had a food sensitivity test like 2 years ago, and chocolate and tea were both on them, which are both things I love. And I was like, what? But, I took them out. I was taking the test. I had to do my work. And wouldn't you know, my body loved having those things out, but I did not know that tea had copper. So I'm going to have to look into that
And
more.
think of all the tea. I'm here in the South these days, and everybody's very hyped up. I mean, in a good way. I don't mean that at all negatively. And then I look and see what they drink, which is iced tea all the time. And copper is very stimulating to the brain function. I mean, it makes you on It makes you very wired. You can be tired but wired. So when that's the case with women going through perimenopause, you need to check your copper levels. We do it with a TMA, a tissue mineral analysis using the hair. And I'll tell you, with perimenopausal women, I see 8 out of 10 are copper toxic.
Oh, really interesting. Yeah, luckily we're gonna have one other talk on hair testing and heavy metals, and we'll get into some.
Then you should definitely make a
balance.
point of asking that individual all about copper.
Okay. Well, let's talk about zinc, which you said helps make progesterone, which women are learning through this summit. Is something we often want to boost while we're still cycling to kind of balance estrogen. What are good sources of zinc?
Well, zinc is tough. Red meat, of course, for those that eat meat. So you've got your red meat, you've got your eggs if you're an egg lover, or you've got pumpkin seeds. Okay. So you've got basically those 3 sources. And if you're not a lover of any of those on a daily basis, then I would suggest at least 45 milligrams of a chelated zinc. I like a zinc gluconate on a daily basis.
45 milligrams. That is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sometimes higher, but I'm erring on the side of caution.
Awesome. So interesting. Okay, well, what other topics was I wanting to cover with you? Yeah, you taught me about a supplement I had never heard about before, which is hesperidin. Can you tell us about that?
It's a bioflavonoid, and we find that with at least 250 to 500 milligrams, it stops hot flashes in its tracks. So it's very important in terms of stopping and mitigating hot flashes. As is with many people, a couple of other things, speaking of hot flashes and these uncomfortable symptoms, people can also use some flax seeds. Sometimes that works. 2 tablespoons a day keeps hot flashes away. Progesterone in and of itself is very helpful. I'm in love with progesterone. I think it's really the magic bullet when it comes to perimenopause. And added iodine. Iodine, interestingly enough, is an old-fashioned hot flash quencher. So if you're not getting enough iodine, you could be flashing a little bit too much as well because of the connection with the thyroid.
And I'm curious what you think on dosage for iodine.
I err on the side of caution. Those with Hashimoto's have to be careful. I'm very well aware of that. But I would say anywhere, Bridget, from 1 to 5 drops in maybe of Lugol solution, 1 to 5 drops of Lugol solution in 8 ounces of water.
Okay, interesting. So let's go back to the progesterone. What kind of form do you like it in? Do you require testing first? How do you use it?
I think people should be tested, but I must tell you, we've been testing for over 20 years, and practically everybody is progesterone deficient, whether they're peri, post, pre, or way beyond. No, I'm telling you something, because you have a lot of progesterone in your brain. It's not just, the reproductive tract. So I'm a big believer. I love progesterone. I love it topically. I have a progesterone cream called Progestakey that I created myself for my own use, and now my clients use it. Love it. I like 20 milligrams a day, which is the physiological dose that the body makes. I like it used topically, and I like it used according to a cycle. It's usually about the 12th to the 25th calendar day that we suggest it be used. Then you take a break, and then again from the 12th to the 25th calendar day.
Okay. Speaking of cycling things, I wondered, are you a fan of kind of cycling nuts and seeds and oils with the phases of the cycle, or just kind of give it all and let the body do its thing?
I think it gets very complicated for people, quite frankly, and I try to keep it a little bit more simple.
Okay.
I mean, there are enough things that they do for their bile and for their progesterone and for their liver that I don't make a really big deal of it, but I would tell people that they should be rotating their foods as much as possible. I wouldn't have the same thing day in and day out. I would rotate at least 3 meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So in other words, don't have the same thing 3 days in a row for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It takes 3 to 4 days to cycle something that could be toxic through the system, whether it's a supplement, food, or seasoning, or herb, or spice.
Okay, that's good too. Something I didn't really get back to was something you said earlier with the fiber supporting detoxification. Do you want to talk more about that?
Well, it escorts the bile acids out of the body, so fiber makes us free in so many ways, and that's about 25 grams a day. You can get that in addition to your pound of vegetables, which so many of us don't really take in on a daily basis. But that's where your flax seeds, your chia comes in handy, or even your hemp seeds. So 2 to 4 tablespoons of the seeds, maybe a little extra vegetables, and you're good to go, because you really need to be eliminating on a daily basis.
Yeah, those seeds can get you up higher real quick. So they're
Real
super
quick,
helpful.
much better than psyllium or some of the other seeds that really can absorb too much water. So I'm a big seed believer. And then that's the source of the omega-3s and 6s, which is good, especially if it's hemp seeds.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah, they're so powerful. And protein in there too. So those are
Yum.
really powerful. So let's see what else we were going to cover today. So talking about detoxification, the liver, the bile, the fiber. Oh, you mentioned in your book the adrenal glands, supporting the adrenal glands, which you want to talk about a little bit why that's important in this time of life and how we can do that?
Well, they're your backup system. I mean, that's really what this is all about. So that when your reproductive system, of primarily the ovaries, start to dwindle, then the adrenals pick up the slack, so to speak. So that's why you need to support them as much as possible. What I suggest is a little pantethine on a daily basis, which is the really active form of pantothenic acid, which is the most important vitamin or mineral or adaptogen for stress. And as far as I'm concerned, people can use rhodiola if they'd like, or a little ashwagandha. I'm not a real big believer in too many herbs because I find that they're very toxic. We see a lot of herbs that are loaded with lead or arsenic, because half of them, more than half, 3/4 are now coming from China. Hopefully that's going to change. I'm a lover of pantethine, 2 grams a day if you've got really low blood pressure. If you have moderate stress, maybe just 1 gram a day. That's 1,000 milligrams scattered through the day.
Pantethine is which B vitamin?
B5,
Okay.
pantothenic acid.
Okay. Okay.
My very favorite of all time.
Yeah, that's
one that's
really
an old
interesting.
favorite of the 70s that has to be it's got to reemerge. We have to, what is the word? We have to reinvent pantothenic acid.
We're doing it today. Yeah, I did not know that was so. I mean, I guess I take some mixes of some adrenal supports, and sometimes they're high in Bs, so I'll have to check that. It's interesting you bring up the caution with the herbs. So I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner for many years, and many practitioners have stopped using Chinese herbs because of the toxicity issue. So
Oh, it's not just Chinese herbs. It's the ones that they get here that they don't even know are from China.
yeah.
I mean, if you start testing, and I represent a company, Unity Health Systems. I've been a formulator. I've been a spokesperson for them for years. They run everything through third-party testing, and it's unbelievable what will come back sometimes. So it's pretty sad to see that so many herbs and so many substances are becoming contaminated, particularly if they're coming from China. And unfortunately, over the past 8 years, a lot of our raw materials have had to come from China. So I'm hopeful that that's going to change, and we'll be getting more of the good stuff right here in the USA.
Yeah, I think that's a great point for people to look for. I know there's like I don't know if it's an ashwagandha farm near here, and I'm in Oregon, and they're like making their own tinctures and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I think
that is cool.
Yeah,
totally cool.
Yeah, knowing the source, knowing like your farm is nearby and it's handcrafted, it's definitely.
And I want to go on record. I love Chinese herbs. It's just that some of them are toxic because of the heavy metals. I have seen nothing work magic the way Chinese herbs will with some people. So it's not that I'm against Chinese herbs. It's just that they've become contaminated, just the way we have with toxic perimenopause.
Yeah, we want to be clear. It's not the herbs, it's like the purity of them and what they're exposed to.
Exactly.
And growing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just feel like it can really take it up a notch to energetically to like kind of know where that herbs come from. And some people listening might be growing their own herbs, which is amazing. So
we love and there's certain wonderful places here in this country. Herb Farm, are they out of Oregon? Herb Farm? I think so.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Very high level products.
Yeah, just same with food, right? Best to kind of get it local and know your farmer, I guess. Well, tell us more about, you're coming out with a new edition of this book, Before the Change.
That's the one.
Yeah, tell us. So you've got a gift too for our listeners, an excerpt from it. Tell us about that.
The excerpt that I chose was one of my favorite chapters that I spent a long time researching, which are kind of like the secret cures every woman needs to know about the most common symptoms. So we have the best herbal choices, of course, the most pure herbal choices for all kinds of crazy symptoms that you may be having from any area of your body that could be acting up during this transitional time of life. So that is our free gift for everybody. And I hope that they pre-order the book, which should, God willing, be available on Amazon. All good things considered.
If it's not quite ready, we'll definitely list the date when it's ready, when the summit goes live. And you've written other books. I would love to hear just more about the scope of your work so people can check it out.
Well, I've been, how do we say this? One who's thought outside the box for a very long time. And I'm very big on root causes. I mean, it's not enough to say this is inflammation. So where are you getting the inflammation from? Inflammation doesn't just come from out of the blue. So every single one of my books talks about root causes. I started way back in 1988. My first book was Beyond Pritikin, and that's where I talked about the right oils and about fat-free and about gluten and about too many grains in the diet. I talked about that way before it ever became, mainstream news in this day and time. I've written over 34 books.
Wow.
And so the ones that are currently on the market are the ones that we have updated. The Fat Flush Plan is now the new Fat Flush Plan with a cookbook, with the Fat Flush Foods, with a journal and shopping guide. And now, of course, the new Before the Change. My biggest books have been Before the Change and the Fat Flush Plan. So they have all the latest, greatest information about the liver, about bile. And they're specifically good for all of your viewers that are concerned about gallbladder health, whether they have or don't have a gallbladder, because we deal with that, which nobody else does in their diet books.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm actually interviewing you for my podcast on the Fat Flush Plan next week. So by the time this airs, that will be out already. So if people want to go back and listen to that, they can. But yeah,
good. We'll cover some of that. What fun.
Yeah, and I really encourage people to get the book because just this little half-hour snippet, you can tell Ann Louise has like a ton of information and really knows her stuff. But getting the whole picture, I think, is better, and kind of picking out things that sound like they make the most sense for you at this point in time. So yeah, we encourage you to get the book, and you can get the free gift. And Louise, thank you so much for your time and coming on the summit.
Oh, you're so welcome.